In this video, I'm going to show you how to DIY craft the top 3 most commonly used types of terrain for Dungeons & Dragons. If you're a seasoned vet or just looking to get into the game, this terrain will level up your game from pen and paper to a classy production. First up, dungeon furniture. I have the luxury of using a 3D printer, but a lot of these small pieces of furniture can easily be made from popsicle sticks and thin cardstock. Depending on the type of game you want to run, focus on some parts that will get a lot of use. You can't go wrong with boxes and barrels, round tables, bookcases, and treasure chests. Throw in a bed or two, some doors, and you're well on your way to having a fully populated encounter. Painting these parts is very easy. Most of it got an even coat of burnt umber for anything made of wood. Then various accent colors for fabrics and books were picked out. I then came in with a light tan dry brush and some dark washes to quickly finish them off. Let's take the adventure outdoors with number 2. What's more iconic than some realistic scenic trees? These trees are made from some tree branches I found out in the woods. And this one here was made from a wire armature, but that's a bit too tedious even for me. I superglued them to a magnet base. I then based them with a slurry made from drywall compound, PVA glue, some coconut fibers, and patience. Hit that like button if you wish you had more patience. I know I do. So that the base had a better shot of staying together, I added a piece of drywall mesh tape to the bottom to give it tensile strength as it dries. Ironically, I then spray primed it gray, only to airbrush them back to brown for that natural wood color, which they started out with. To get them looking all tree-like and less dead-like, I used some of this canopy foliage that you tease apart with your fingers to get these puffy wisps. Now with some spray adhesive, I was able to attach these to the tops of the trees. You can do multiple layers to get the desired level of foliage, and if you have multiple colors, try and sprinkle the tops of the canopies with the lighter color to simulate light hitting the leaves. If you're not happy with how the colors turned out, some light airbrushing can also be done to get the right shadows and highlights going. And of course, apply approximately 7 billion coats of varnish if you want these to not shed like crazy. Last but not least, number 3. We're going to make some dungeon pizzas, or ultimate dungeon terrain as the kind Professor Dungeon Master likes to call them. If you don't want to bother with the tedious setup and teardown of tile systems, complex modular connectors, and are mostly fine with abstract environments for your players, then this style of theater stage will be right for you. The lack of walls lets all the players see what's going on and makes storage very easy and setup even easier. I made one variation on the Professor's design, and that's using actual pizza pans for the base of the build. I coupled that with adding magnets to the bases of all my minis and other small terrain scatter. Having a magnetic base makes sure nothing tips over accidentally as the game goes on. The build materials for this one are very simple. I found various sized pans at my local dollar store. While I was at the dollar store, I also picked up some 5-minute epoxy. This will come in handy later. Next stop is the art store for some craft foam. Together with some paint, we have most of the materials we need right here. This build was a breath of fresh air for me. It's so simple, it feels odd somehow. The biggest challenge I had was figuring out a way to stick things to the smooth metal pan. This is where the 5-minute epoxy came in. After cutting out the EVA foam and sanding the pan, I mixed a full tube of dollar store stuff and spread it evenly across the pan. If you haven't used this stuff before, it's not that complicated. Take a scrap piece of cardboard and push the plunger to get both liquids onto it. Then mix very well with a stick. You have 5 minutes of working time before it gets hard. These are effectively one piece now. Another way of sticking these down is using contact cement. Scuff up the metal as before, then apply the contact cement to both.
Hey, what's that smell?
Oh, I'll open a window. Sorry about that. Maybe I'll just stick to the epoxy. The rest is a piece of cake. Let's do some recreational geometry. I googled how to find the center of a circle, and then I picked my favorite method. I chose the 3-chord method, but you could try some different ones yourself. Next, we can draw some patterns with the only goal being to create 3 distinct and recognizable zones in the circle radiating out. For the natural scenic outdoor terrain pizza, we're just going to fade from a dark green to a light grass in the center, as I couldn't think of a non-immersion breaking way of delineating the zones. If you haven't worked with EVA foam, you basically need to know a couple things. It gets very easy to work with if you apply heat to it, so find a way to hit it with some heat and start scribbling away. You can either cut into the foam, which gets amplified by the heat gun, or just make indents with some sort of tool, which should always be done while the material is heated up if you want the texture to stick. If you make a mistake or want to remove some texture you added, as long as you didn't do any cutting, you can hit it with a heat gun again and smooth it out. Try this out yourself, you can likely get some interesting results with some experimentation. I chose to go with these designs, cobblestones for the middle, and then paver stones all around. For the wooden one, I went with wood planks naturally. For the center, I chose to go with this fishbone approach and just regular planks on the outside. To get the wood grain texture, you can do a combination of a wire brush while the EVA is hot, or you can accentuate some of them with some light cuts of the hobby knife. The paint scheme is similarly simple. Starting from a gray spray prime, I accented several bricks and cobblestones in various colors. Once dry, I took a dry makeup brush and offloaded most of the paint off of it. I then did a heavy dry brushing with some lighter colors, such as tan and light gray. This unifies all the base colors and different color stones we added, while still making them look distinct. Once that's dry, I added some various dark color pigments to get more dirt and grime effects onto the pans. The wooden one got a similar treatment, but instead of using multiple colors for the brown base coat, I only used red on some boards, and made the center fishbone pattern much brighter. If we're going with the theater stage analogy, think of the very center as being the spotlight, and the rest fading to black. This is what I was trying to replicate in the paint scheme. Instead of using EVA foam for the scenic pan, I epoxied a piece of fabric on there instead, using magnets here to hold it in place while it cures. This is starting to be very similar to how you'd prep a pizza. To give the ground some texture, I added some homemade sculpting paste made from cellulose and drywall powder. Try to keep this as thin as possible while still hiding most of the fabric texture. Once dry, I painted in splotchy hues of brown and black, and then came in with a watered down Mod Podge to apply the flocking. You can use PVA glue here as well. Having a spray bottle handy to periodically wet the top surface helps wet blend various layers of flocking until you have the desired look. I used a mix of foam flock, static grass, and coconut fibers. I also had a sprinkling of gravel and fine small scale rocks at the end to help sell the look. Now that we have all that, you can truly see how flexible this type of approach is to terrain for Dungeons & Dragons. You don't want it getting in the way of the actual gameplay. For example, if your players want to head off into a shop and rob the shopkeeper for all he's worth, you can quickly create this encounter on the fly without having to have planned for it ahead of time. Or if you want to quickly put together a dungeon, just break out the cobblestone pizza and add some treasure chests and doors. For an ambush while the party sleeps at the inn, you can throw together some beds and a door and a window. If you want to head into a warehouse and look through the crates, you can just put down a bunch of crates. If you enjoyed this concept and want to see more of this type of terrain, go check out the Dungeon Craft channel. The Professor is a huge source of inspiration with creative builds like this one. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.